Good afternoon, gardeners. It's Sunday, September 26th, and it is a gorgeous early fall day here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. Today, I'm going to share with all of you everything there is to know about selecting, planting, and growing blueberries. Now, there is a lot of information in this video, so be sure to check out the table of contents down in the video description if you need help navigating this guide. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon storefront and spread shop in the video description for a list of the gardening products I use and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated. Blueberries are one of the most versatile fruiting plants in the world. They have everything you can want in a fruit tree. Huge yields, delicious taste, enormous adaptability to a wide variety of climates, compact size, and they're virtually pest-free unless you have a big deer problem. They can be grown anywhere from containers to right up against your house as beautiful edible landscaping bushes to giant fields overflowing with fruits. Because the bushes are compact and they tolerate climates as cold as Zone 3 or as warm as Zone 10, most anyone outside of the tropics can grow them. Here in North America, you can grow blueberries from Canada all the way down to Florida, as well as the highlands of Mexico. The overwhelming majority of the world's population can grow these small plants. But it's not that simple. Blueberries have three caveats, three conditions or limitations that can cause gardeners to fail at growing them. If you don't meet these three conditions, your harvest will suffer, if not fail entirely, and the plants could even die. These three conditions are: number one, variety selection. There are 5 major varieties of blueberries grown in the United States: Northern High Bush, Southern High Bush, Rabbit Eye, Half High, and Low Bush. These 5 varieties vary greatly in size, cold and heat tolerance, required chill hours, and it is imperative that you pair the proper blueberry varieties with your climate and the size of your growing area. Number 2, pollination requirements. While some blueberry varieties are self-fertile, the majority require cross-pollination. This means that you need to plant at least 2 genetically unique different varieties of blueberries next to each other for the flowers to become fertilized and bear fruit. But you must also pair at least 2 varieties that flower at the same time of year. If you select an early season and a late season variety, their flowers won't open at the same time, so cross-pollination won't occur. You must research each variety and ensure that the flowers bloom and overlap at the same time of year. Most online nurseries recommend pollinator companions on the individual website listings, making the process very simple. So if you want an early season and a late season variety to stretch out your harvest, you'll need at least 4 bushes, 2 different early season varieties, and 2 different late season selections. Even if you select a self-fertile blueberry variety, it will perform much better when cross-pollinated and yield far more fruit. So I discourage planting only 1 self-fertile bush because it just won't give you a nice harvest. And number 3, soil pH. Proper soil pH is the greatest challenge for growing blueberries. While most species of plants happily grow in soil that's roughly neutral in pH, blueberries need to grow in very acidic soil. The ideal soil pH for blueberries is about 4.3 to 5.3. Soil that's naturally that acidic is uncommon, so you are almost certainly going to have to routinely add some type of supplements to your soil to maintain its acidity. Blueberry bushes growing in soil that is too alkaline can result in little to no fruit and even death of the plant. Now we will explore each one of these 3 points in more detail, and I'll show you how to plant your blueberry bushes. Point number 1, before you purchase blueberry bushes, you must ensure you're purchasing the right blueberry types for your location. There are 5 major varieties of blueberries grown in the United States: Northern High Bush, Southern High Bush, Rabbit Eye, Half High, and Low Bush. Northern High Bush varieties are native to the eastern and northeastern regions of the United States and can grow to be 5 to 9 feet tall. Most Northern High Bush varieties require somewhere between 600 and 1,000 chill hours per year, which is the amount of time required for a plant to sit in temperature ranges of 35 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Be sure to know the annual chill hours of your location, and I will overlay a map of the United States right now to give you a rough idea of where you fall. Northern High Bush varieties are ideal for more northern climates because they have a later bud break, which puts them at a lower risk of having the flowers killed by a late frost. While individual hardiness zone requirements may vary by cultivar, Northern High Bush cultivars are often planted in zones 4 through 7. all high bush varieties require pruning, so keep that in mind if you select one. Southern high bush varieties are native to the southeastern United States, and they're similar to northern high bush, but with lower chilling requirements. Most southern high bush cultivars have chill hours ranging from 200 to 600 hours a year, which allows them to fruit in climates with warmer winters where northern high bush cultivars won't. Due to the lower chill requirements, southern high bush varieties are much more at risk of breaking bud early, so areas that have false winters are at high risk of late frost damage. I used to live in the Northeast, and it's pretty common to have warm spells in late March and early April, followed by another plunge in temperatures, making southern high bush a risky proposition in places that see spring frosts. So keep that in mind. Southern high bush varieties are normally planted in milder zone 7s through zone 10. Like northern high bush, these will also require pruning. Rabbit-eye blueberries are native to the southeastern United States, and they thrive in climates with long, hot, humid summers and mild winters. They can grow to be 6 to 10 feet tall. Rabbit-eye blueberries flower before the high bush varieties, making them the most susceptible to spring frosts. However, despite the early flowering, rabbit-eye blueberries usually ripen a month after high bush cultivars, making them the ideal variety to extend harvests into late spring, early summer, in warmer climates where late frosts are less of an issue. Rabbit-eye blueberries often have longer lifespans than high bush varieties and are far more disease resistant. Rabbit-eye blueberries can produce for decades, whereas high bush varieties may stop producing after about 20 years or so. Rabbit-eyes are best grown in warmer zones 6 through 9, but remember they may need protection against those late spring frosts. Low bush varieties are small, usually only growing about 1 to 2 feet, and require very little pruning. They are native from Labrador to Manitoba in Canada, and from Maine to North Carolina in the United States, stretching as far west as Iowa and Minnesota. They are very cold hardy, commonly grown in zones 3 through 6, but with reports of growing even in zone 2. Low bush varieties produce small berries, usually preferred for making baked goods rather than fresh eating due to their small size. They are generally considered to be a wild blueberry. Half-high varieties are crosses between high bush and low bush varieties. Plants can grow to be 3 to 5 feet tall, which puts them right in the middle of a low bush and a high bush. They perform excellent in containers, they're extremely cold hardy, and can thrive all the way down to zone 3. They have the cold hardiness of the low bush varieties, but with the larger fruits approaching the size of the high bush varieties. So if you're in a very harsh northern climate with very cold winters, half-high varieties may be of particular interest to you. Right now on the screen, I'm providing a list of common cultivars of each of the 5 types of blueberry bushes. Please keep in mind that this is only a partial list of the most popular varieties. There are many more, and more cultivars are being developed by breeding programs every single year, so don't consider this a final list by any means. Point number 2 is pollination requirements. While some blueberries are self-fertile, such as many of the high bush varieties, it is strongly advised to grow a pollinator type interplanted for cross-pollination. One self-fertile blueberry bush won't give you much of a harvest, but 2 cross-pollinating bushes can start to amount to something. So I want to give you a sample pairing. As I mentioned before, variety selection is everything when growing blueberries. Because I live down on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, where winters are short and mild and summers are wickedly humid, I selected 2 early producing southern high bush varieties and 3 late producing rabbit-eye varieties. This will allow me to have an extended harvest season. I purchased my plants bare root last winter from a place called Bottoms Nursery in Georgia, and they provided me with the ideal pollinator pairings on their website. The southern high bush varieties I selected are Star and O'Neill, and they were recommended pollinator pairings that produce very large, very early fruits. I purchased 1 Star variety, which is in the middle here, and 2 O'Neills, which are on the left and right sides. I have to plant the Star variety in between the 2 so they pollinate each other. Then I have 3 rabbit-eye varieties, Titan, Cruer, and Pink Lemonade. Titan and Cruer are recent developments with enormous fruit, and they are ideal pollinators for each other. Pink Lemonade is a fun variety that has pink berries when ripe. It's notably self-fertile, but produces better when interplanted with other rabbit eye varieties. Rabbit eye blueberries require more generous spacing than the high bush types, so I will be planting the 3 high bush varieties over there and the 3 rabbit eye varieties over here, with the rabbit eyes getting the larger space. Blueberries are beautiful ornamental bushes, so they are the perfect stealth edible landscaping bushes if you live in an HOA like I do and you want to sneak in fruit trees around your yard or up against your house that won't threaten the foundation thanks to the shallow root system. And point number 3, the pH of your soil is critical when planting blueberries. Blueberry plants want a soil pH of approximately 4.3 to 5.3, which is very acidic. Most native soils will not be this acidic, so supplementing your soil with pH lowering amendments is ideal. Here's what I did. Last winter, I purchased these elemental sulfur prills. They are natural elemental sulfur that you work into the top layer of your soil. I have this sulfur product linked in my Amazon storefront in the video description under the category Slow Release Fertilizers if you need a source. These sulfur prills usually have a purity anywhere of 90 to 99%. While aluminum sulfate is often used as a fast-acting soluble acidifier for soils, it is easy to overdose and can build up to toxic levels in soils over time. I like this elemental sulfur product because it is much safer, and if you over-acidify your soil, you can simply bring the soil pH back up with garden lime. And while it's fine to use those soluble acid-loving fertilizers like this Miracle-Gro Miracid right here, in the short term, if your plants need a quick boost, you shouldn't rely on them long term. I'm actually not quite sure what Miracle-Gro uses as a soluble soil acidifier in this. However, instead of using products like this constantly to maintain your soil pH, I recommend using these elemental sulfur prills for long-term management of the soil and save these synthetics only for occasional quick feedings as necessary. Now, the Ohio State University Extension has published a table of the rates of elemental sulfur required to decrease soil pH to a depth of 6 inches from neutral to 5.5, and I will post that table here as well as a link to it in the video description. Long story short, light sandy soils require less amendments than silty or heavy clay soils. Back in February, I spread almost 2 pounds of elemental sulfur into this growing area of 116 square feet and scratched it into the top layer of the soil. Aerobic soil microbiology won't begin to break down the sulfur unless it is at least 55 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer, so do not place the sulfur until it is sufficiently warm enough. Otherwise, it could be processed into toxic hydrogen sulfide by anaerobic bacteria, which will smell like rotten eggs. You should do this at least 2 months before you plant your blueberries to give the sulfur ample time to break down if your soil is too alkaline. Keep the soil sufficiently moist to aid in the decomposition. If you need to plant your blueberry bushes now and did not have time to acidify your soil, you can simply mix the sulfur prills into your planting hole now, spread some more on top of the surface, and top them with pine bark nuggets. And again, for the time being, you can use these temporary acidifying solubles like Miracle-Gro Miracid. The Miracid will help them establish, and then the pine bark nuggets and sulfur prills will break down over time and help fix the soil up. Once the sulfur prills were placed, I topped the entire area with pine bark nuggets. Pine bark has a pH of 4 to 5 and is a good way to acidify your soil, and I think it is the ideal mulch for blueberry plants. In most of my videos, you see me using hardwood bark mulch, but hardwood bark mulch breaks down to a neutral or slightly alkaline pH, so you don't really want to use that as a mulch in this case. Pine bark mulch is the king for blueberries. While you often see me plant things during the early spring on this channel, blueberries are one of those plants that really benefit from being planted in the fall in hardiness zones that don't threaten their survival. Early fall is the ideal time to plant our blueberry bushes, roughly 60 to 90 days or so before the first frost, because it gives the blueberry bushes enough time to establish roots and then sit dormant most of the winter and continue to slowly establish underground. Now that it's the perfect time of the year and the sulfur prills and pine bark has been sitting in this area decaying for most of the year, it's finally time for me to plant my blueberries. Now first I'm going to plant my southern high bush varieties. I am spacing the southern high bushes 3.5 feet apart, and I have these little stakes marked at all of the center line locations that I'm going to plant the bushes. I also have here some natural cow manure compost, and then I have some all-purpose 544 granulated organic fertilizer. I also have bone meal, which is one of my secret ingredients right here to helping establish strong roots. And then I have the sulfur prills that I'm going to mix into the planting hole as well. That way they'll break down slowly over time and keep the soil acidic. Now here's an example of a typical planting hole that I dig. I always dig the hole with a digging shovel on the right, and then I take the edges and I square them off with a square shovel on the left. And I do that because you don't want to dig a perfectly round hole to put your plants in, otherwise they tend to become root bound like you're putting them in a container. I like to have really straight walls and angles in the hole I dig. That way they do not simulate a container and they root better. These planting holes have been dug too deep, and I did that on purpose because I'm going to mix in cow manure compost along with the native soil and the fertilizers, and I'm going to make that hole depth more shallow, and I'm going to make it so the root ball sits about 2 inches high because I want to backfill around the whole area with compost. And when you plant your trees a little high on a little compost mound, it encourages surface roots to break out and it helps them establish more quickly. So we're going to take the compost and we're going to put 2 nice size shovels full in, and we're also going to mix in a little bit more of that native soil. Then I'm going to take a small handful of the sulfur prills, a handful of an all-purpose granulated fertilizer. We don't want too much because we don't want to encourage a lot of growth at this time of the year because fall is approaching. And then a handful of bone meal. And then we're going to mix that up really nicely. And you can see how the compost has been worked in, and there are sulfur prills and granulated fertilizer scattered evenly throughout the medium. The 3 southern highbush blueberry plants have been planted. They're planted equidistant with 3.5-foot spacing between each. And you'll notice that my plants are off balance a little bit. They have more growth in the back. And that's because I had them sitting up against the side wall of my house for about 9 months. So they were competing with each other and trying to grow out and over each other. So they have a funny bend to them, especially this one over here. And the reason why I'm kicking that out to the back so much is because the sun tracks like this. And now you can see the sun is up there right now. So I want the plants to grow out. And by facing the plant with all of the green growth in, I will encourage it to come forward like this and curl towards the sun. I don't want this plant to be planted with all of that green growth facing out towards me right now, because then it would just continue to grow out and I get a lopsided bush. The other thing that you'll notice is that all of the root balls are sticking slightly out of the hole, and that's by design because, like I said, I want them to stick out about 2 inches high because I'm going to backfill the whole area with compost and mulch, and I want the trees to send surface roots in that really fluffy, loamy compost and mulch medium. So now we're just going to backfill the rest of the planting holes. We're going to add our compost, and then we're going to add a little bit more fertilizer and then the pine bark mulch layer. You see how this root ball is nice and high? That's exactly what we want to place our compost around. The root ball will send surface roots all throughout this little compost hill. Just make sure you don't place any of the compost around the trunk of the tree. You don't want any kind of rotting humus to rot up against your tree trunk. Then the final thing that we're going to do is place just a couple of sulfur prills in that top layer of compost, just because we want that to continue to break down over time and acidify the soil all around the general area. And use gloves when you place this sulfur because it's acidic and it could not be so good for your skin. And then we're going to pull the pine bark mulch all around the trees. Now that the blueberry bushes have been planted and I placed the compost and put the mulch back in place, I need to water the entire area in with a hose. This will help accelerate the breakdown of the granulated organic fertilizer as well as the sulfur prills. Once the area has been wet down, we're then going to take two 1.5 gallon watering cans and fill them with a few glugs of fish emulsion as well as the Miracle-Gro Miracid mix. This will help get my plants off on the right foot. I'm going to mix it at the recommendation for outdoor plants, which is 1 tablespoon per gallon. Each plant is going to get 1/3 of the watering can or 1/2 gallon of the liquid. This will immediately lower the pH of the soil around the plants and help them establish, just in case the pH of my soil is not quite right yet. And that right there are my southern high bush varieties of blueberries. As I mentioned, the star variety is in the center because I need it to pollinate both of the O'Neills, which are on the left and the right side. And then over here are my rabbit eye blueberries. We have Titan, we have Kruger in the middle, and then we have the pink lemonade variety right here on the edge. They're a little bit smaller than the southern high bush, but I think they're really going to take off now that they have their feet in ground where they belong. One thing you also must remember is that every single day, the first week, you have to come out and water these with just plain water. You need to keep the soil moist to help the plants establish. Don't let them run dry until they're established. And that is everything that you need to know about selecting, planting, and growing blueberries. Now, I know this was a lot of information, but as I mentioned, it is all chaptered in the table of contents down in the video description to help you sift through the information if you need to reference this video again. So everybody, I sure hope you found the video helpful. If you did, please hit the like button and make sure to hit the notification bell to be notified for future videos like these. If you want to know about any of the products that I use in my garden or some of the fertilizers that I featured in this video, they're linked down below in the video description in my Amazon storefront. And also check out the merch in my spread shop in the video description as well. Thanks so much again for watching this video, and I hope to see all of you again on the next one.
Dale, are you all ready for bed? Look at you. You look like a little human. You got your blanket. You got your head on the nice pillow. You look really tired, buddy. It's been a long day. You got to go for a walk with your cousin Stacy. Had lots of fun. We'll let you go to bed for the night, buddy.